I could feel every eye in the church on me as I walked down the aisle alone. The whispers started immediately. My sister Tiffany looked up from the altar and smirked. She came alone. She stage whispered to our mother, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. I gripped my invitation tighter, wishing I could disappear. Just as I was considering turning around and walking out, a stunning woman in a blue dress slipped her arm through mine. "Sorry I'm late, love," she said, kissing my cheek. The room went completely silent. I had never seen this woman before in my life. I stood there frozen for a moment, staring into the eyes of this beautiful stranger who had just saved me from total humiliation. She squeezed my arm gently, guiding me toward an empty seat in the 3rd row. As we sat down, she leaned close to my ear. "Just go with it," she whispered. "I'm Jessica." My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. Here I was, Garrett Thompson, 32 years old, and still needing to be rescued at my own sister's wedding. 3 weeks earlier, my fiancée Amanda had packed her things and walked out of our apartment. "You're not ambitious enough, Garrett," she'd said, twisting the knife as she handed back the engagement ring. "I need someone who knows what he wants." I later discovered she'd been seeing Brad from the marketing department at my architecture firm for months. The same Brad who had congratulated me on my engagement with a firm handshake and a smile that now made sense in its insincerity. But the breakup was just the latest in a long string of disappointments that seemed to define my family's view of me. Growing up as the older brother of Ryan Thompson had been an exercise in inadequacy. Ryan was the golden child, the one who effortlessly achieved whatever he set his mind to. Captain of the football team, valedictorian, full scholarship to Princeton, followed by Harvard Business School. Now, at 30, he was already a junior partner at a prestigious consulting firm, married to a pediatric surgeon, with twin boys and a house in the suburbs. Meanwhile, I had struggled through college, taking 5 years to finish my architecture degree. I worked at a respectable firm, but hadn't advanced as quickly as my father thought I should. Walter Thompson, successful business owner and patriarch, never missed an opportunity to ask when I would finally get serious about my career. Ryan was already managing accounts at your age. He'd remind me during our monthly family dinners. My mother Nancy would nod in agreement, adding something about how Ryan and his wife Heather had just renovated their kitchen or taken the twins to Disney World. Tiffany, my younger sister by 4 years, had always aligned herself with our parents' favoritism. Today she was marrying Jacob Miller, a successful dermatologist whose family owned 3 clinics across the state. The perfect addition to our achievement-oriented family. When the wedding invitation arrived, with its gold foil lettering and +1 designation, I'd still been with Amanda. After the breakup, I considered not attending at all, but knew it would only give my family more ammunition. Garrett couldn't even show up to support his sister, they'd say. So I decided to face the music alone, steeling myself for the inevitable comments and pitying looks. And now here was Jessica, this mysterious woman who had appeared out of nowhere to spare me that fate. "How did you know?" I whispered as Tiffany's maid of honor began her walk down the aisle. Jessica gave a small shrug. "I'm actually crashing this wedding. I do that sometimes. I saw how they looked at you and heard what your sister said. Nobody deserves that. I should have been alarmed that a complete stranger was inserting herself into my family drama, but all I felt was relief. "Well, thank you," I whispered. "I'm Garrett." "I know," she replied with a slight smile. "Your name was on the usher's list." The ceremony proceeded, and I found myself studying Jessica from the corner of my eye. She was probably around my age, with dark hair cut in a stylish bob and intelligent green eyes. She wore a cocktail dress that managed to be both elegant and slightly daring, and she carried herself with a confidence I immediately envied. As Tiffany and Jacob exchanged vows, I noticed Jessica watching with an unreadable expression. When they were pronounced husband and wife, she applauded politely, then turned to me. "You should probably prepare our story," she said quietly. "They'll ask questions at the reception." She was right. My mother would demand to know everything about this mysterious girlfriend I'd never mentioned. "Follow my lead," Jessica added as we stood to exit the church. I'm good at this. I nodded, still trying to wrap my head around the situation. As we moved toward the exit, my father intercepted us, his eyes fixed on Jessica with obvious curiosity. "Garrett," he said, extending his hand to Jessica. "Aren't you going to introduce us to your friend?" "Of course," I said, finding my voice. "Dad, this is Jessica." "Jessica, my father, Walter Thompson. It's lovely to meet you, Mr. Thompson," Jessica said, her voice warm and confident. "Your daughter looked absolutely beautiful today." My father beamed, already charmed. "Call me Walter, please. And yes, our Tiffany always knows how to make an entrance." He gave me a look that clearly said, "Where have you been hiding this one?" As more family members approached, eager to meet my mysterious date, I realized with a shock that for the first time in years, my father was looking at me with something approaching approval. The cocktail hour before the reception was held in the garden behind the country club. Jessica kept her arm linked with mine as we navigated through clusters of guests, accepting champagne from passing waiters. My cousin Patrick slapped me on the back as we passed. "Looking good, Garrett." Bounced back quick from Amanda, huh? I forced a smile, but Jessica squeezed my arm, a silent signal that she had this covered. "Actually," she said with just the right amount of conspiratorial warmth, "Garrett and I knew each other before Amanda. We reconnected recently." Patrick raised his eyebrows, impressed. "Well, lucky timing then." As soon as he walked away, I steered Jessica toward a quiet corner of the garden. "We need to get our story straight," I said urgently. "My family will interrogate you." Jessica nodded, completely unfazed. "Bathroom break in 5 minutes. We'll sync up." True to her word, she excused herself moments later, and I followed after an appropriate interval. We met in the hallway outside the restrooms, away from prying eyes. "Okay," Jessica said. "All business now. Here's what I'm thinking. We met 6 months ago, at a gallery opening for an architect your firm was working with. We hit it off, but you were still with Amanda, so we stayed friends. After your breakup, we reconnected and have been dating for about 3 weeks. I was impressed by how quickly she'd constructed a believable scenario. That works, but they'll want details. I'm a graphic designer who specializes in branding for small businesses," she continued. "I live in Brookside. I have a cat named Oscar Wilde. I graduated from State University with a degree in visual communications. I'm originally from Springfield, but moved here 5 years ago." "You've done this before," I said, not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. She shrugged. "I'm good at reading rooms and thinking on my feet. Just follow my lead, add details where you can, and remember, keep it simple. Too many specifics will trip us up." "Why are you doing this?" I had to ask. "You don't know me." Jessica's expression softened. "Let's just say, I know what it's like to be the black sheep of the family. Now we should get back before they send a search party." When we returned to the reception, now in full swing in the grand ballroom, my mother immediately descended upon us. Nancy Thompson was a petite woman, whose appearance belied her formidable nature. Her salt and pepper hair was styled in an immaculate bob, and her posture was military straight. "Garrett, darling," she said, air-kissing my cheek before turning her full attention to Jessica. "And you must be Jessica. Walter told me you two came together." What a delightful surprise. The way she emphasized surprise carried an undercurrent of accusation. Why hadn't I mentioned Jessica before? "It's still quite new," Jessica said smoothly. "We wanted to be sure before making any announcements." My mother's eyes lit up at the word announcements, and I silently marveled at Jessica's ability to give my mother exactly what she wanted to hear. "Well, you must come sit with us," she insisted, leading us toward the family table near the front of the room. "Tiffany will be thrilled to have you join us." I doubted that very much, but followed along, whispering to Jessica, "You don't have to sit through dinner with them." "And miss the best part?" she whispered back. "Not a chance." As we approached the head table, Ryan stood to greet us, his perfect smile firmly in place. He was half a head shorter than me, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. "Garrett, good to see you, man." His handshake was firm, his Rolex glinting under the chandelier light. Then he turned to Jessica, and something flickered across his face. For just a second, I thought I saw recognition, followed by confusion. "And you are?" "Jessica," she said, extending her hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Ryan. I've heard so much about you." Ryan recovered quickly, his smile returning as he shook her hand. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," Jessica replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Throughout dinner, Jessica charmed everyone at the table. She asked my father intelligent questions about his business, complimented my mother on her charity work, and even managed to steer the conversation away from potentially embarrassing topics about my career trajectory. "Garrett was telling me about the sustainable housing project he's designing," she said during a lull in conversation. "The way he's integrating solar technology into the traditional neighborhood aesthetic is really innovative." I'd mentioned that project exactly once, briefly, during our hallway strategy session. Jessica had not only remembered it but positioned it as something impressive. My father looked at me with surprise. "You never mentioned you were working on sustainable housing." "You never asked," I said, with more edge than I intended. But Jessica smoothly redirected. "He's too modest, but his firm is really taking notice. Aren't they considering you for project lead on the next phase?" "They weren't," but I nodded, caught up in the fiction we were creating. "It's a possibility." "Well, that's excellent," my father said, and I was stunned to detect actual pride in his voice. "We should discuss it more next time you come over." Across the table, Tiffany was watching us with barely concealed annoyance. Her moment in the spotlight was being encroached upon by this unexpected development. "So Jessica," she cut in, "how did you and my brother really meet? He never mentioned you before today." The way she emphasized really suggested she didn't believe our gallery opening story. Jessica didn't miss a beat. "Sometimes the most important connections happen when you're not looking for them," she said. "But I'm glad we found each other." She placed her hand over mine on the table, and I was surprised by how natural it felt. Later, as the dancing began, Jessica pulled me onto the floor. "You're doing great," she said, as we swayed to a slow song. "I'm following your lead," I admitted. "But I have to ask, how did you know about my sustainable housing project?" "I barely mentioned it." Jessica smiled. "I listen well, and I might have Googled you when you were getting us drinks. Your firm's website mentions your current projects." "Resourceful," I said, both impressed and slightly unnerved by her thoroughness. "It's easier to tell convincing lies when they're based on truth," she replied pragmatically. As we danced, I noticed Ryan watching us from the bar, his expression tense. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, engaging the bartender in conversation. "I think my brother is suspicious of you," I said quietly. Jessica followed my gaze to Ryan, and I felt her stiffen slightly in my arms. "Why would he be suspicious? He doesn't know me." But there was something in her tone that made me wonder if that was entirely true. The reception was in full swing, with the dance floor packed and the alcohol flowing freely. Jessica had somehow become the unexpected hit of the wedding. My Uncle Dave insisted on dancing with her, claiming she reminded him of a young Michelle Pfeiffer. My typically reserved Aunt Marge had pulled Jessica aside for what appeared to be an intense conversation, after which they both erupted in laughter. Even my father's business associates seemed charmed by her quick wit and genuine interest in their work. "Your girlfriend is quite something," my father commented as we stood at the bar, watching Jessica chat animatedly with a group that included my mother and her friends. "She is," I agreed, surprised by the warmth in my voice. Even though our relationship was a charade, I couldn't help but admire how effortlessly Jessica navigated social situations that I had always found challenging. "Not like Amanda," he continued, sipping his scotch. "Never quite understood what you saw in that one." The comment stung, not because I still had feelings for Amanda, but because my father had pretended to like her when we were together. His revisionist history was typical of how my family operated, always adjusting their narratives to suit the current situation. "You seem to like her well enough at Thanksgiving," I pointed out. My father shrugged. "We wanted you to be happy. But Jessica, she has substance. Reminds me a bit of your mother when she was younger. Coming from my father, this was the highest compliment he could bestow. Before I could respond, the wedding planner announced it was time for the bride and groom's first dance. As Tiffany and Jacob took the floor to At Last by Etta James, Jessica appeared at my side. Your mother has invited us to Sunday brunch next weekend, she whispered. I politely deflected, but she's persistent. I groaned quietly. I'm sorry. This was supposed to be just for today. It's fine, Jessica assured me. I told her we'd have to check our schedules. That gives you an easy out later. Just tell her I had a work commitment come up. The song ended, and the DJ invited all family members to join the couple on the dance floor. I hesitated, but Jessica gently pushed me forward. Go on. I'll wait here. I joined my parents, Ryan and his wife Heather, and various cousins circling Tiffany and Jacob. As I awkwardly swayed to What a Wonderful World, I caught sight of Jessica standing at the edge of the dance floor. She was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between wistfulness and calculation. The DJ then called for the bride's family to remain for a special dance. As Louis Armstrong's voice filled the room, the wedding planner approached Jessica, speaking into her ear. Jessica looked surprised, then nodded. To my astonishment, she was led to a microphone set up near the band. Ladies and gentlemen, the wedding planner announced, the bride's family has prepared a special surprise. Jessica will be performing a song dedicated to Tiffany and Jacob. My jaw dropped. This was definitely not part of our plan. From Tiffany's equally shocked expression, it wasn't part of hers either. My mother, however, was beaming, and I realized she must have arranged this, probably after learning about Jessica's musical background, a detail I wasn't aware Jessica had fabricated. The pianist began playing the opening notes of The Way You Look Tonight, and Jessica stepped up to the microphone. For a brief moment, I worried our entire charade was about to collapse spectacularly. Then Jessica began to sing, and the room fell silent. Her voice was extraordinarily rich, soulful, and perfectly controlled. She sang with such emotion that several guests wiped away tears. I stood transfixed, watching this woman I'd only met hours ago command the entire room. As she held the final note, the crowd erupted into applause, with several guests giving her a standing ovation. Tiffany's expression had transformed from shock to a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd been upstaged at her own wedding, and she knew it. Jessica returned to my side as the regular dancing resumed. You never mentioned you could sing like that, I said, still stunned. You never asked, she replied with a small smile. I minored in vocal performance in college. That wasn't in our backstory. I improvise when necessary. Your mother mentioned how much Tiffany loves that song. And, well, I couldn't say no to Nancy Thompson. Few people can, I agreed. But now we have a new problem. My family is never going to let you disappear after that performance. Jessica laughed. But before she could respond, Ryan appeared beside us, his expression tense. Quite a performance, he said to Jessica. Almost like you were born for the spotlight. There was something in his tone that seemed loaded with meaning. Jessica's smile remained in place, but I noticed her posture stiffen slightly. Just trying to contribute to the celebration, she replied lightly. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Funny, I could have sworn we've met before. At the Willingham Charity Gala last year, perhaps? Jessica shook her head. I'm afraid not. I would have remembered. My mistake, Ryan said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it was a mistake at all. If you'll excuse me, I promised Heather another dance. As he walked away, I turned to Jessica. What was that about? Nothing, she said too quickly. Some people can't stand not being the center of attention. Runs in the family, I guess. She nodded toward Tiffany, who was now directing the photographer to take more photos of her and Jacob. I wasn't entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. Instead, we joined the dancing again, Jessica expertly guiding me through moves I didn't know I could manage. For a while, I forgot about Ryan's strange interaction, lost in the surprising pleasure of dancing with Jessica. Later, as Jessica excused herself to visit the restroom, I headed to the bar for more drinks. As I waited for the bartender, I overheard voices from around the corner, partially hidden by a large floral arrangement. "What are you playing at?" Ryan's voice, tense and hushed. "I don't know what you mean." Jessica's voice, cool and controlled. "You know exactly what I mean. Does Garrett know who you really are? Does your wife know who you really are?" Jessica countered. There was a pause. Then Ryan spoke again, his voice even lower. "Whatever you think you know." "I don't think, Ryan. I know." Jessica's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Now, if you'll excuse me, my date is waiting." I quickly moved away from the bar, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. My mind raced with questions. How did Jessica know Ryan? What did she know about him? And most importantly, who was she really? I spotted her emerging from behind the floral arrangement, her composure perfectly intact. When she saw me, she smiled as if nothing had happened. But now, I could see the calculation behind her eyes, and I wondered what game she was really playing, and why she had chosen me as her unwitting partner. I managed to wait until we were seated at our table again, before confronting Jessica. The band was playing loudly enough to give us some privacy, and most of the guests were either dancing or mingling around the dessert table. "I overheard you, and Ryan," I said, keeping my voice low. "You know him, don't you?" Jessica's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "This isn't the place to discuss it." "Then let's find somewhere that is," I insisted. "You've involved me in whatever this is. I deserve to know what's going on." She hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but not here." Before we could leave the table, my mother appeared, flushed with excitement and champagne. "Jessica, darling, everyone is simply raving about your performance. You must join the choir at our church." Jessica smoothly transitioned back into her charming persona. "That's very kind of you, Nancy. I'll certainly consider it." "Wonderful," my mother beamed. "Oh, and Tiffany is having some issues with the cake-cutting schedule. The photographer wants to do it now, but Tiffany insists it was planned for later. Perhaps you could help sort it out, Garrett? You always were good at managing your sister's expectations." The irony of my mother asking me to handle Tiffany's crisis, when I'd spent most of my life being told I was the difficult one, wasn't lost on me. But I nodded, throwing Jessica a look that said, our conversation wasn't over. As I approached the cake table, I could see Tiffany engaged in a heated discussion with the wedding planner and photographer. Her perfect day was encountering friction, and Tiffany never handled friction well. "The lighting is perfect now," the photographer was explaining. "In an hour, we'll lose this golden glow." "But the schedule says 8:30, Tiffany insisted, her voice rising. "The cake cutting is a major moment. We can't just do it whenever you feel like it." "What's the problem?" I asked, stepping into the fray. Tiffany turned to me, her expression a mix of frustration and relief at seeing a potential ally. "Garrett, tell them we can't cut the cake now. Half the guests are still finishing dinner, and Grandma Roberts is in the restroom." I looked at the increasingly frazzled wedding planner, then at the photographer who was checking his watch with growing impatience. "What if we do some preliminary cake photos now, with the good lighting, then do the actual cutting at the scheduled time?" I suggested. Best of both worlds. The photographer considered this, then nodded. "That could work. We can stage some shots now, get the golden hour lighting, and still do the actual cutting later." Tiffany hesitated, then relented. "Fine, but only if we get the real cutting exactly at 8:30. Crisis averted, I helped position Tiffany and Jacob for their photos, then stepped back to let the professionals work. As I turned to find Jessica, I nearly collided with Amanda. My ex-fiancée looked stunning in a form-fitting red dress, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant updo. Behind her stood Brad from marketing, looking uncomfortable in a rental tux. "Garrett," Amanda said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here." "It's my sister's wedding," I replied flatly. "Of course I'm here." An awkward silence fell between us. Brad shuffled his feet, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "Well, you look good," Amanda finally said. "I'm glad things are okay." Before I could respond, Jessica appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine with the easy familiarity of someone who had every right to be there. "Sorry that took so long, babe. Your mom wanted to show me all the family photos on her phone." She turned to Amanda with a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Jessica." Amanda's eyes widened slightly as she took in Jessica, her obvious beauty. The confident way she held herself, the proprietary way her hand rested on my arm. "Amanda," she replied, her voice tight. "And this is Brad." "Nice to meet you both," Jessica said warmly. "How do you know Tiffany and Jacob?" "Oh, I used to date Garrett," Amanda admitted, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Jessica's expression registered perfect surprise, followed by understanding. "Oh, well, isn't that something? Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? Garrett and I might never have reconnected if things had gone differently." I fought to keep my face neutral, amazed at Jessica's ability to twist the knife so elegantly that Amanda probably didn't even realize she was bleeding. "You two are together?" Amanda asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Going on 3 weeks now, though we've known each other longer," Jessica said, squeezing my arm affectionately. "Sometimes the right person is there all along. You just have to be ready to see them." She smiled up at me with such convincing adoration that for a moment I almost believed it myself. Amanda's face flushed. "Well, that's great. I'm happy for you, Garrett." Her tone suggested she was anything but happy. "Thanks," I said, finding my voice. "We should probably get back to our table. Good seeing you, Amanda." "Brad." As we walked away, Jessica kept her arm linked with mine. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. Seeing Amanda had stung less than I expected, largely due to Jessica's perfect handling of the situation. We had barely made it back to our seats when my father approached, his expression uncommonly warm. "Garrett, Jessica, I've been wanting to catch you two all evening." He pulled up a chair, leaning in conspiratorially. "I just wanted to say that I'm impressed, son. Jessica is a remarkable woman. Talented, intelligent, poised, exactly the kind of partner I always hoped you'd find." I blinked, momentarily speechless. In 32 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my father had expressed genuine pride in me. "Thank you, sir," I managed. "And Jessica," he continued, "you must come to dinner next week. I insist. I want to hear more about your work, and perhaps Garrett can fill us in on this sustainable housing project. It sounds fascinating." "I'd like that, Walter," Jessica replied smoothly. As my father walked away, I turned to Jessica, the weight of our deception suddenly heavy on my shoulders. "This is getting out of hand. They're planning our future together." "It's just dinner," Jessica said, though she looked troubled as well. "You can always tell them I had to leave town for work." "And what about Ryan? Are you going to tell me how you know my brother?" Jessica sighed, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "It's complicated, Garrett, and not something I can explain here." Before I could press further, the sound of clinking glass announced the father of the bride's speech. My father stood, looking uncharacteristically emotional as he spoke about Tiffany's achievements, her perfect match in Jacob, and his pride in the woman she had become. I tried not to notice that he'd spoken more glowingly about my sister in 2 minutes than he had about me in my entire life. As the speeches continued, I found myself watching Jessica. Who was this woman really? A wedding crasher with an extraordinary talent for deception? Someone from Ryan's past with an axe to grind? Or just a kind stranger who had seen someone in distress and decided to help, only to get pulled into family drama she never anticipated? The speeches concluded, and the cake cutting proceeded right on schedule at 8:30. As Tiffany and Jacob fed each other cake for the cameras, Jessica leaned close to me. "I'll tell you everything," she whispered, "but not here. Meet me on the terrace in 10 minutes." She slipped away before I could respond, leaving me to wonder what revelations awaited me outside. I watched her go, noting how she carefully avoided the corner where Ryan stood with Heather. Whatever their connection, it clearly wasn't friendly. I made my way to the bar, ordered a bourbon, and tried to prepare myself for whatever Jessica was about to reveal. As I waited for my drink, Jacob's brother Scott sidled up next to me. "Hey man," he said, his words slightly slurred. "That Jessica is something else. Where'd you find her?" "Art gallery," I replied automatically. Scott nodded appreciatively. "Lucky guy. Tiffany mentioned you had a rough breakup recently. Didn't expect you to rebound with someone like that." I took my drink from the bartender. Neither did I. "Funny though," Scott continued, oblivious to my discomfort. "Jake's cousin is in security, does background checks and stuff. Said he couldn't find anything on her. No social media, minimal digital footprint. Professional ghost, he called her." I nearly choked on my bourbon. "What? Why was he looking into Jessica?" Scott shrugged. "Standard procedure, apparently. Jake had him check out all the non-family guests. Paranoid about wedding crashers or something." He laughed. "Guess he missed actually finding one, huh? Anyway, thought you should know. Bit weird, right?" He wandered off before I could respond, leaving me with a fresh set of questions. Why would Jessica have such a minimal digital presence? And why would she risk attending a wedding where security checks were being conducted? With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I headed for the terrace, unsure what truth awaited me there. The night air was cool and refreshing after the heat of the reception. String lights illuminated the terrace, creating pools of warm light against the darkness. Jessica stood at the stone balustrade, looking out over the country club's manicured grounds. Her profile was silhouetted against the night sky, and for a moment, I was struck again by how beautiful she was. She turned as I approached, her expression serious. "Thank you for coming." "You owe me an explanation," I said, joining her at the railing. "I just found out that Jacob had his cousin run background checks on guests, and apparently you barely exist on paper." Jessica didn't seem surprised. "That explains a lot." I wondered how long it would take for someone to dig. "Who are you really? And what's your connection to Ryan?" She took a deep breath. "My name really is Jessica. Jessica Reeves. I'm a forensic accountant with Dalton and Klein." "A forensic accountant?" I repeated, trying to connect this information with everything that had happened. "What does that have to do with my brother?" 3 months ago, our firm was hired to audit Tech Vista Investments, where Ryan works. We were looking into inconsistencies in their financial reports. She paused, watching me carefully. "During the audit, I discovered evidence that someone was siphoning money from client accounts into an offshore shell company. Small amounts from multiple accounts, structured to avoid detection." My stomach tightened. "And that someone was Ryan?" Jessica nodded. "I tracked the transactions back to him. Nearly $2 million over the past 18 months. I shook my head in disbelief. "That's impossible. Ryan's the golden child. He doesn't need to steal." "People don't always steal because they need to," Jessica replied quietly. "Sometimes it's about feeling entitled to more than they have. Sometimes it's about the thrill of getting away with it." I leaned against the railing, trying to process this information. "So what happened? Did you report him?" I brought my findings to my supervisor. The next day, I was taken off the audit. The week after that, my report mysteriously disappeared from the system, and my supervisor suggested I take some vacation time. Someone buried it, I realized. Jessica's expression hardened. "Ryan has powerful friends, but I kept copies of everything. I've been building my case, gathering more evidence. Then I saw the wedding announcement in the society pages, and realized it was an opportunity to observe Ryan in his natural habitat, maybe learn who his allies are." "So you crashed the wedding to spy on my brother?" I asked, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and betrayal, which was irrational given that our entire relationship was a fabrication. "Initially, yes," Jessica admitted. "I didn't plan to involve anyone else. But then I saw how they treated you when you arrived alone, and," she shrugged, "it seemed like a win-win. I could observe Ryan while helping you save face with your family." I let out a hollow laugh. "Great. So our whole connection was just a convenient cover story. It started that way, Jessica said softly. But I wasn't pretending when I defended you to Amanda, or when I told your father what an impressive architect you are. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened, and Ryan stumbled out, clearly intoxicated. He froze when he saw us, then smiled unpleasantly. Well, isn't this cozy? He approached unsteadily, his perfect facade cracking under the influence of alcohol. My big brother and the corporate spy, having a little heart-to-heart. Ryan, you're drunk, I said, stepping slightly in front of Jessica. Go back inside. Not until I know what she's told you, Ryan snapped, his charm completely evaporated. Has she been feeding you her little theories about me? Her fictional accusations? They're not fictional, Ryan, Jessica said calmly. You know exactly what you did. Ryan's face contorted with anger. You have no proof. I have the transfers, the shell company registration, the altered reports, Jessica replied. I have enough to take to the FBI, which is exactly what I'm doing on Monday. Ryan's face paled. You wouldn't. I already have a meeting scheduled. Ryan turned to me, his expression suddenly desperate. Garrett, you can't believe her. She's nobody to you. I'm your brother. The appeal might have worked once, when I still craved my family's approval above all else. But tonight had shown me how conditional their love had always been, how quickly they embraced me once I appeared to fit their definition of success. If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about, I said. Ryan's desperation turned to fury. You've always been jealous of me, always resented my success. Now you're siding with a stranger over your own blood? I'm siding with the truth, I replied, surprised by my own calm. Something this family has never been particularly good at facing. Ryan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I could destroy her career with one phone call. I could destroy you too. Is that what happened at Dad's company? Jessica asked suddenly. Before you went to business school? Ryan froze, his expression confirming Jessica's suspicion before he could deny it. What is she talking about? I asked. Jessica kept her eyes on Ryan. Your father's company had an accounting irregularity about 8 years ago. Money missing from the operations budget. It was attributed to a software glitch, but I'm betting it wasn't a glitch at all. Ryan's silence was damning. I stared at my brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. You stole from Dad? I needed startup capital, Ryan muttered. I was going to pay it back, but you didn't, Jessica said. You covered it up instead. Ryan's expression darkened. How much? What? Jessica looked confused. How much do you want? Ryan pulled out his wallet. 5,000? 10? To make this go away? Jessica laughed in disbelief. Are you trying to bribe me? Now? Here? Name your price, Ryan insisted. Everyone has one. Before Jessica could respond, I heard a gasp behind us. Tiffany stood in the terrace doorway, her wedding dress glowing in the light spilling from inside. Behind her stood our father, his face a mask of shock. Ryan? My father said, his voice barely audible. What are you doing? Ryan spun around, nearly losing his balance. Dad, we were just, offering me money to keep quiet about his embezzlement. Jessica finished for him, both from Tech Vista and, apparently, from your company years ago. My father's face drained of color. He looked older suddenly, the weight of this revelation aging him before my eyes. Is this true? He asked Ryan. Ryan glanced desperately between Jessica and our father, clearly searching for an escape route. Finding none, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I can explain, he said weakly. Tiffany stepped forward, her perfect wedding day crumbling around her. You're all ruining everything, she cried. This is supposed to be about me, my special day. Tiff, I'm sorry, I began, but she cut me off. And you, she pointed at me accusingly. Bringing this wedding crasher who's been investigating our family? What kind of brother does that? I didn't know, I started to explain. But Tiffany was beyond reason. This is all your fault, Garrett. You and your jealousy, and your constant need for attention. That's enough, Tiffany, my father said sharply, surprising everyone. He turned to Ryan. We're going to discuss this. Now, in private. As he led Ryan back inside, Tiffany shot me one last venomous look before following them. I stood on the terrace with Jessica, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. I'm sorry, Jessica said quietly. I never meant for it to explode like this. It's not your fault, I replied. This family has been a powder keg of secrets and favoritism for years. It was bound to blow up eventually. Jessica hesitated, then touched my arm gently. What will you do now? I looked toward the doors where my family had disappeared, then back at Jessica. I was standing at a crossroads, and for once in my life, the path forward seemed clear. The right thing, I said. Whatever that turns out to be. The next hour passed in a blur of hushed arguments and tense confrontations. My father had commandeered the country club's private office, where he, Ryan, and I were now locked in the most honest conversation our family had ever experienced. Mother joined us shortly after, her social mask completely dropped in the face of this crisis. How could you do this? My father demanded, pacing the room while Ryan sat slumped in a leather chair. Your own family? The company I built from nothing? It wasn't like that, Ryan insisted, though his earlier bluster had evaporated. I needed the money for an investment opportunity. It was going to pay off big, and I was going to replace every penny. But it didn't pay off, I guessed. And instead of owning up to it, you covered your tracks and let Dad think it was a system error. Ryan shot me a resentful look. Easy for you to judge. You've always been content to coast through life with mediocrity. I had ambitions. Ambitions that justified stealing? My mother's voice was barely above a whisper, her shock evident. I fixed it, Ryan protested. I worked 80-hour weeks at the consulting firm to make partner faster. I did everything right after that one mistake. Until Tech Vista, I pointed out, where you apparently went back to your old habits. $2 million, Ryan. That's not a mistake, that's a felony. Ryan's face contorted with anger. Who are you to lecture me? The family disappointment suddenly found a backbone because some woman batted her eyelashes at him. That's enough, my father said sharply. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Garrett, what do you know about this Tech Vista situation? I explained what Jessica had told me, watching my father's face grow more troubled with each detail. And you believe her? He asked when I finished. Yes, I said without hesitation. She has documentation. And Ryan basically confirmed it when he tried to bribe her. My father sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 64 years. I've always known, he said quietly. What? Ryan and I spoke simultaneously. The money from the company. I knew it wasn't a system error. He looked at Ryan with profound disappointment. I had IT trace it. I knew it was you. Ryan paled. But you never said anything. Because I thought it was a one-time mistake. I thought you learned your lesson. My father shook his head slowly. I convinced myself that protecting you was the right thing to do. That confronting you would only derail your promising future. The irony was almost too much to bear. My father had covered for Ryan, reinforcing his sense of invulnerability, while consistently holding me accountable for every minor misstep. And now? I asked. What happens now? Before my father could answer, the door burst open. Tiffany stood there, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, Jacob hovering uncertainly behind her. You're all still in here? The reception is falling apart. People are asking questions. She glared at each of us. This is my wedding day. How could you do this to me? Tiffany, please, my mother began. But Tiffany was beyond consolation. No. I've spent a year planning the perfect wedding, and now it's ruined because Ryan can't keep his hands out of other people's money, and Garrett brought some corporate spy as his date. Actually, Jessica's voice came from the hallway as she stepped into view. I'm a forensic accountant, and I didn't come as Garrett's date. I came independently to gather information on your brother's financial crimes. Tiffany stared at her in shock. You crashed my wedding? I attended your wedding to observe Ryan in a non-professional environment, Jessica corrected calmly. Helping Garrett was an unexpected development. So it was all fake? Tiffany turned to me, her anger momentarily replaced by confusion. You two aren't actually together? No, I admitted. We met for the first time today. Tiffany processed this, then let out a bitter laugh. Of course. Because Garrett couldn't possibly actually find someone like her on his own. The casual cruelty of the comment hung in the air. In that moment, I saw my family with complete clarity, the toxic dynamics, the conditional love, the endless competition. You know what, Tiffany? I said, my voice steady. I'm done apologizing for not meeting this family's impossible standards. I'm done being the designated failure, so Ryan can be the golden child. And I'm done pretending that the way you all treat me is okay. The room fell silent. My father looked stunned. My mother hurt, Ryan defiant, and Tiffany shocked. I had never spoken to them like this before. Garrett, my father began, but I cut him off. No. For once, you're going to listen to me. I turned to Ryan. You've been stealing and lying for years, and instead of facing consequences, you've been praised and protected. That ends now. Ryan stood up, his face flushed. You self-righteous. Sit down, my father commanded, and Ryan complied automatically. My father turned to me. Go on. Encouraged, I continued. Jessica is going to the FBI on Monday, and I'm going with her. What? Ryan's voice cracked. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, I replied. If you've done what she says you've done, you need to face the consequences. And if Dad's company was involved in any way, that needs to come out too. My father's expression was unreadable. You would do that to your own family? I would do what's right, I corrected him. Something this family should have started doing a long time ago. Jessica stepped further into the room. For what it's worth, cooperation goes a long way with the authorities. If Ryan comes clean voluntarily, it could make a significant difference in how this plays out. Ryan looked to our father, clearly expecting him to find a way out of this situation as he always had before. But my father surprised us all. She's right, he said heavily. No more cover-ups. No more protecting you from your own actions, Ryan. Dad, Ryan protested. You can't be serious. Everything I've worked for was built on lies. My father finished. And I helped you maintain those lies because I couldn't face the truth about my own son. That stops now. The office door opened again, and Jacob's cousin, the security expert, stepped in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you all should know. I've been reviewing the information Miss Reeves shared with me, and it's legitimate. The documentation on the Tech Vista embezzlement is extensive and appears authentic. Ryan slumped back in his chair, the last of his defiance draining away. What happens now? My mother asked, her voice small. I looked at Jessica, who stepped forward. Ryan has two choices, she said. He can wait for the FBI to come to him, or he can go to them first thing Monday morning with a lawyer and full cooperation. One of these options has a much better potential outcome than the other. Ryan looked around the room, perhaps searching for another escape route, but finding none. His perfect life was crumbling, and for once no one was rushing to prop it back up. I'll cooperate, he finally said, his voice barely audible. My father nodded, then turned to Tiffany. You should get back to your reception. Your guests are waiting. How am I supposed to pretend everything's fine after this? She demanded. Because it's what adults do, my father replied firmly. We'll deal with this as a family, but right now, you have responsibilities as a host. Tiffany looked like she wanted to argue further, but instead straightened her shoulders, fixed her makeup with a compact from her purse, and nodded stiffly before leaving the room with Jacob. My father turned to Jessica. I owe you an apology, Miss Reeves, and I owe you my gratitude for bringing this to light before it went any further. Jessica nodded, accepting both the apology and the thanks with grace. And Garrett, my father continued, facing me, I owe you the biggest apology of all. For years of not seeing you clearly, of comparing you to an ideal that wasn't even real. I hadn't expected this, and found myself momentarily speechless. My mother stepped forward, taking my hands in hers. "We've been terrible parents to you," she said, her voice breaking, "always pushing you to be more like Ryan, when all along." She couldn't finish the sentence. When all along, I was the one with integrity. I completed for her. The words weren't spoken with bitterness, just as a simple statement of fact. The confrontation had left us all drained, but as we prepared to return to the reception, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth, painful as it was, had finally been spoken. And in that truth, I had found my voice and my strength. As we left the office, Jessica fell into step beside me. "That was impressive," she said quietly. "Standing up to your family like that. Couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. She smiled. "I think you could have. You just needed the right moment." As we rejoined the wedding reception, now winding down as guests began to depart, I realized that Jessica was right. The strength had always been there within me. I just needed to find it. And somehow, this stranger who had walked into my life just hours ago had helped me do exactly that. 6 months later, I stood in front of the Thompson Architectural Group's newest project, a sustainable mixed-use development that combined affordable housing with green spaces and community facilities. As the lead architect, I had shepherded the project from concept to groundbreaking, incorporating innovative solutions that had already earned industry recognition. "Impressive," Jessica said, joining me at the construction site. Her dark hair blew slightly in the autumn breeze as she surveyed the foundations taking shape before us. "It's going to change lives. That's the plan," I replied, smiling at her. In the months since Tiffany's wedding, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. After the confrontation in the country club office, Ryan had indeed gone to the FBI with his lawyer first thing Monday morning. His cooperation had resulted in reduced charges, but he was still facing significant penalties. Tech Vista had been eager to avoid publicity, reaching a settlement with affected clients and implementing stringent new oversight measures. My father had insisted on a complete audit of Thompson Industries, revealing that Ryan's borrowing had been more extensive than initially thought. The company had survived the scandal, but my father had stepped down as CEO, bringing in outside leadership for the first time in the company's history. The family dynamics had shifted seismically. My parents, forced to confront their years of favoritism, had begun the painful process of rebuilding relationships based on truth rather than appearances. Tiffany, after initially blaming me for ruining her wedding, had gradually come to recognize her own role in our dysfunctional family system. Her marriage to Jacob was already showing strains, but they were in counseling, committed to creating a healthier relationship than the models they had grown up with. As for Jessica and me, the connection that began as a charade had evolved into something genuine. After the wedding, she had given me her real phone number, suggesting coffee to process everything that happened. That coffee led to dinner, which led to more dinners, and a relationship that developed slowly and authentically. "You're thinking about that day again, aren't you?" Jessica asked, reading my expression with the uncanny perception that had initially drawn me to her. "Hard not to, on days like this," I admitted. 6 months ago, I was stuck in a rut, desperately seeking approval I was never going to get. Now you're leading award-winning projects and finally being recognized for your talent," she finished. "Not to mention standing up to Walter when he tried to pressure you into designing that monstrosity of a vacation home." I laughed. That was more terrifying than the FBI interviews. Jessica took my hand, her green eyes serious. "You know what I admire most about you? It's not the success or the talent. It's the way you've handled everything with grace. You never gloated over Ryan's downfall or used the situation to punish your parents. What would be the point?" I shrugged. "They're doing a pretty good job punishing themselves." We began walking back toward my truck, passing construction workers who nodded respectfully in my direction. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, confirming Sunday dinner. These family gatherings were still tense affairs, but they were honest in a way they had never been before. Have you told them about the Westridge proposal? Jessica asked. Not yet. I wanted to wait until it was official. The Westridge project was a major opportunity, a chance to design an eco-friendly corporate campus that would showcase all the principles I believed in. The committee votes next week. They'd be fools not to choose your design, Jessica said with the confidence that still sometimes surprised me. In my entire life, no one had ever believed in me the way she did. That evening, we had dinner at the small Italian restaurant where we'd had our first real date. As we finished our meal, Jessica reached across the table to take my hand. I have news, she said, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her voice. Dalton and Klein offered me a partnership. Jessica, that's amazing. I squeezed her hand. You've earned it. Especially after the Tech Vista case. She nodded, but something in her expression told me there was more. It would mean heading up their new West Coast office. In Seattle. The news hit me like a physical blow. Seattle was 2,000 miles away. Oh, I haven't given them an answer yet, she continued quickly. I wanted to talk to you first, to see if we could figure out what this means for us. 6 months ago, I might have immediately assumed this was the end, that once again, someone I cared about was leaving me behind. But I wasn't that person anymore. What do you want it to mean? I asked instead. Jessica took a deep breath. I want it to mean we figure out a way to make it work, because what we have, it's worth fighting for. In that moment, looking at this remarkable woman who had crashed into my life at exactly the right moment, I knew what I needed to do. Seattle has buildings too, I said simply. And Thompson Architectural has been talking about expanding to the West Coast for years. Jessica's eyes widened. Garrett, are you saying? I'm saying I love you, I replied, the words flowing easily now that I'd decided to say them. And I'm saying that I've spent too many years trying to fit into spaces that weren't built for me. I'm ready to build something new. With you. Tears shimmered in Jessica's eyes. I love you too. But your family, your firm, will still be there, and planes fly both ways. I squeezed her hands. Besides, my parents owe me about 30 years of supportive decision-making. She laughed through her tears. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, I replied honestly. When you walked into that wedding and said, Sorry I'm late, love, you changed everything. You showed me what was possible when someone believed in me. I'm not letting that go. 2 weeks later, we stood together in my nearly packed apartment. The Westridge Committee had selected my design, with the understanding that I would oversee the project remotely from Seattle, making monthly trips back for in-person reviews. My father, to my surprise, had not only supported my decision to relocate, but had fast-tracked the opening of Thompson Architectural's West Coast division, which I would be heading. Ready for this? Jessica asked, as we surveyed the boxes surrounding us. Ready for everything, I replied, pulling her close. You know, when you pretended to be my girlfriend at Tiffany's wedding, I never imagined we'd end up here. I did, she admitted with a small smile. Not right away, but by the end of that night, I knew there was something real between us, something worth exploring. Even though I was a mess who couldn't stand up to his family. You weren't a mess, she corrected firmly. You were someone who needed to remember his own worth. And once you did, she gestured around us, at the evidence of our shared future taking shape. That weekend, before our move, we attended a family dinner at my parents' house. Ryan was there, subdued but present, working through his community service requirements and mandatory financial counseling. Tiffany and Jacob came too, their relationship visibly strained but enduring. And my parents, still adjusting to their new reality, made awkward but genuine efforts to connect with me as the person I actually was, not the person they had wanted me to be. As we said our goodbyes, my father pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, son, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Not because of the Westridge project or the Seattle expansion. I'm proud of the man you've become. The man you always were, if I'd had the wisdom to see it. The words I had craved for decades finally came when I no longer needed them to validate my worth. Still, they healed something deep within me. "Thank you, Dad," I said simply. On the drive home, Jessica rested her head on my shoulder. "Full circle," she observed, "from a fake date at a wedding to building a life together." "The best kind of architecture," I replied, "taking something unexpected and turning it into something beautiful and lasting." As we drove toward our future, I reflected on the strange sequence of events that had brought us here. One moment of kindness from a stranger had cascaded into a complete transformation of my life. Jessica had helped me find the strength that was always within me, and in doing so, had helped me build a life of authenticity and purpose. Sometimes the most important structures we create aren't built of steel and glass, but of truth and courage. And sometimes, the most important person in your life walks in at exactly the moment you need them most, saying simply, "Sorry I'm late, love." Have you ever had someone unexpectedly come into your life and change everything for the better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth today. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that may be.